Hi guys! Thanks for joining me on my channel again. I have some exciting news for those who follow my comic. I've started publishing on Tapastic, so if you're not a big fan of DeviantArt, you can read it there instead, or on Facebook. I'll leave the links to those below. Okay, let's jump in with installment 2 of this mini-series on how to make your own comic. Last time we talked about layout and I showed you how I add speech bubbles. I'm not going to show you that part today because it's kind of tedious, but if you missed it, it's in my last video. Today is going to be brief. I want to talk to you a little about how I use layers. This is one of the best things about digital art, and you should take full advantage of it. The program I'm using is Procreate on my iPad. I'll use anywhere between 20 and 50 layers, but because I merge them periodically, I probably use more throughout the process. To start, I use one layer for each character in my rough draft. That way, if you want to resize or move the characters, it's very easy. Once you have your layout finished, you can merge all the layers together. Then go in and ink your characters. Again, I use one layer per character. I also use a separate layer for things like hair or hands that often need to be changed a little. That way you can redraw and erase to your heart's content without worrying about that beautiful face that you just drew. In my case, I also tend to draw the hands small on the first go-round, so they often need to be made bigger. A good guide is to make your hand equal to the length of the chin to the hairline. Once I have all my line art the way I want it, I merge it all into one layer, including the boxes of the panels. You don't need to do this if you don't want to, but for a program like Procreate, it's really helpful because you're going to create a reference layer for shading. This is going to let you drop colors directly within your lines to flood fill. Keep in mind you need closed shapes for flood fill to work well, so don't leave your lines open or the color is going to flood out of the lines and into other places where you don't want it. Okay, now to make your line art a reference layer in Procreate, first make a new layer for coloring beneath it and select the new layer. Then take two fingers slightly separated and swipe to the right on your line art layer. It will turn purple, indicating that it is a reference layer. You may have some trouble at first. If you swipe right with one finger, it alpha locks your layer instead, and sometimes it doesn't realize you're using two fingers. It's okay, just keep trying. The speed it lets you color with is well worth the trouble. Once your reference layer is on, you can grab your color from the top right corner and drag it to the area you want filled. Drag and hold over the area, but don't let go. It will fill once your pen stops moving. Don't lift your pen yet. Once the color fills, if you swipe right, still not lifting the pen, it will increase the tolerance, meaning that your fill will get even closer into those corners and hard to reach places. Sometimes you may have a line that almost touches, but there's a tiny little space. In this case, swipe to the left. Again, your pen has not left the screen. This will decrease the tolerance. The color will stay further within the border and won't jump any thin lines. As for the layers I use for shading, I start with a layer just for black. Underneath, a layer for dark gray. I will typically use this just for my character's dark gray hair. I also use an easy gradient technique to give more depth. To make a gradient, fill in all the dark gray areas, then duplicate your layer. Make this new layer a little lighter. Then go in with a large soft brush and erase the bottom part of the hair which you want to be darker. This technique can be applied to anything. Under my dark gray layer, I make a gray layer for clothes. Here I will use multiple shades of gray on the same layer. You can use the gradient technique here too if you want. Under the gray layer, I make a light gray layer. Once I have all the base layers for my characters, I want to add the detail for the hair. Make a new layer above the top coloring layer, in this case the black layer, and add shadows, highlights, and strong points of light. I usually do the hair in multiple layers. When you're satisfied, you can always merge the layers together if you're feeling overwhelmed. Lastly, for my shading, I make a new layer under the characters and color in any backgrounds as well as outlining the characters. That's it for Procreate. I'm not going to go through adding all the speech bubbles and text again, but I want to show you quickly how I add texture on Photoshop. I use a technique called a clipping mask. This clipping mask lets you add texture to a specific layer without overflow in other areas. Let's say I want to add texture to the gray background in the last panel. I select that background layer and make a new layer above it for my texture. Go up into layers on your toolbar. The drop-down has a Create Clipping Mask option. click on that. Now your new layer is ready. You can take a brush and texture over it, or I like to use a pattern stamp. Either click on the pattern stamp icon or use your keyboard shortcut, S for stamp. Go up into stamps on your toolbar. You'll have to download ones you like because the ones it comes with aren't very good. Then just take a large stamp and apply it over the whole area. It will stay exactly where you want it. Don't be afraid to play with layer settings too. You can get some cool effects from the same pattern. And that's it. Thanks for coming around, and I'll see you next week. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my comic The Request in the description bar below. Bye guys!